Welcome to another episode of Black Belts and Boardrooms. I'm your host, Amir Khawaja, alongside my co host and good friend, Renard Henry. And this is the show where we sit down with leaders who have earned their stripes through discipline, hard work, and a commitment to never quitting. And their stories will challenge you. And that is exactly why we like to invite these guests here to share with us their perspective, because leaders come in all forms and in all industries. And today's leader is no exception. But before I introduce our guest today, Renard, let me ask you a question. So tell me about a time where, you've been telling other people to do something and maybe they just weren't listening. Maybe they just weren't, ready to act on it. Was it harder to act on your own advice, or was it harder to try and get them to do what advice you're giving?
Man, I think probably harder to act on my own advice. I always say I'm great at giving advice, but terrible at taking my own at the same time. So I can say there's been many, many times. I can even go on vacation. I used to tell my team, "Man, you need to take vacation," and then I never took vacation. So that has changed, of course, but many, many ones I can think of that great advice, but didn't take my own advice. So glad that's changed over the years.
Thank you, Renard. Well, with that, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Mr. Kevin Rustici. And, we keep telling ourselves that there are people out there who, maybe you're one of them, who likes to read books, take good notes, and know exactly what good or great looks like. But then you're in a room where all of this knowledge is going to come to work and come to fruition. And you watch yourself do the things that, you've told someone else not to do. But knowing it and knowing how to help people achieve those goals, this is where our guest today is truly a leader. And in February 2025, he took the operating seat himself as the VP and Chief Operating Officer. Can't even say my own words today. Of a contracting company. And not just any contracting company. This is a company that's been around for quite some time. And I'll let Kevin introduce the company and himself as well, what he does on a day-to-day basis. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Love the opportunity to have just a conversation with two friends today. So I work at Boulter, Industrial Contractors. And to Amir's point, it's 135 years old. So it's got some history. It's got we're on the fifth generation right now. And it's been fun. It's been a ride. I had never worked in blue collar, admittedly professionally. I did when I was in high school. I was in landscaping myself and knew it was hard work. And I think it helped steer to some of the things of how I approach leadership today, because I think I've been there, and when you're in that seat, you have that experience, you know what it feels like to feel on the other side of management or leadership or ownership even. So it's been fun. But I'm really excited to have a conversation today. I think when you talked about change, I think that was such a cool question to ask, because I think it is for myself, just like Renard. I found it a lot easier to give other people advice. And I think I did that so much. I wanted to help. I wanted to lead. I wanted to heal. And hence why I have a biology degree. I wanted to be in healthcare for that exact reason. And I realized over time, like Renard mentioned, is that I use that as a convenient distraction to distract myself from myself. Thinking that was the best way to, I guess, show up in the world. And I had to realize that was another version of ego, just not the version of ego that I had in my own mind. So excited for today's conversation and discussion, because I think life is interesting, especially when you take the time to start peeling back the onion.
Yeah. And Kevin, yes, you're absolutely a friend of the podcast. You're a friend of ours, personally speaking. And not to mention, you and your co-host on your podcast, Time Out with Leaders, Tyler, you guys are doing amazing work just in that space alone. But then to listen each of you individually, each of you brings a very unique perspective. And I feel very fortunate today that we get to hear your unique perspective. And to just pick on what you just started with, I think ego is a very good starting point because, on the topic of advice, whether it's giving advice to businesses or giving advice to your coworkers or people you're collaborating with, and conversely, giving advice to yourself, I think that ego point really comes into the picture. When giving advice to somebody else, it's really us trying to uh, put ourselves on a pedestal, show that, hey, we are giving you value or I'm giving you value. But then giving ourselves advice is to just warm ourselves to the ideas that we want to say, hey, we want to believe this, or I want to believe whatever it is, whether I'm a very useful person or not. Just, on that point, expand a little bit more, how you look at your professional self. And I know you've helped many businesses before you settled in the role you're in. But help us understand how you view ego, how you help other leaders become more aware of their own personal egos getting in their way. And then how does that show up for you professionally when you are more conscious as you are today?
Yeah. So I'll start with ego. Everybody has one, full disclosure, right? So it's not this thing that we can get rid of. But Amir, I think you said it best. It's that keyword awareness, right? It's when we become aware of this. Now it no longer has, let's say, power or control over our decision making, over our emotions, over how those emotions then become feelings, which then become beliefs, which then become actions, right? Before you start that cycle, having the ability to see the difference of a thought and then holding on to a thought. Uh, and I think a lot of times we gravitate, we have a thought, and then all of a sudden it starts to take its own imagination with our own creativity, that tape that we all play in our own mind, right? It can become something that it never was. And I think the more I remind myself that it's not about me, right? To not take things personally. And I fight really hard not to judge others because I know how I judge others will be exactly how I judge myself. And so I fight really hard to show up without judgment, to show up without expectations, because it allows me to be more present. And if I'm not sitting there thinking about, well, what's in it for me, right? Or why am I doing this? And you truly show up for the other individual, it's amazing what you can hear and listen. And yes, sometimes it's the actual words that they choose or select, but sometimes it's more body language, right? And you start to pick up on some of that emotional energy, for lack of a better term, and I think I've had more success by trying to speak to the individual than I do the group, for these types of conversations and discussions. I think the three of us have probably sat in trainings and leadership development and read books, and it's nothing against that. But if you lack the first word that we said earlier, self-awareness, you're kind of talking at an audience that's not willing to change because they don't know they need to change. So getting them to that point of seeing, like, hey, it's not a defect, it's not wrong, but now that you're aware of it, will you change and will you adapt your approach? And for me, I'm constantly battling that ego, and I found out, like, helping and healing people was a way that I charged my ego. I found that external validation was another way that I charged my ego. It was proof points that I needed externally in order to prove to myself of worth and value. And you do that long enough, right? You then become addicted to the fickle nature of human nature. So you will ride that emotional roller coaster and think that, oh, this person's thinking about me, or they're probably thinking about that I'm doing this. When in actuality, they're thinking about what they're having for lunch that day, right? So when you take that center of the universe mindset, it becomes self-consuming, right? And to me, when I take a step back and try to think about how truly little that I am, but let alone our planet, in the grand scheme of things. That's why getting out in nature for myself, like when I walk, like I notice this natural like reset, because you feel like you're something within a greater ecosystem than just society. It's ecology, right? It's the way that everything moves. So when I do that, it really helps me to take a step back. But then ask my questions. I actually have my internal naysayer has a name. It's Mark. So every time Mark starts talking, it's like, shut up, Mark, right? But it allows me to show up a little bit differently. And I'm a big proponent of intention drives attention. So when I do have those conversations, Amir, it's, hey, I'm showing up to empower, encourage, and enable the success of others, but not at a detriment to my own self. And that last part has evolved. That was never there. So I was constantly pouring from an empty tank. And I thought it was okay, because here I was helping others. And if I helped others, they would like me, right? They would accept me. And it's exhausting over time. And I knew that when I was stepping into leadership, I needed to lose that. Right. I needed to lose and peel back some of those false beliefs, these things that I acquired over time through observation, through reading, through experience. I had to shed some of these things because they weren't my true core beliefs. They were things that started to stick to me like burrs. So I had to really figure out who I was. I guess I always say is find that inner kid. Who was I before society tried to tell me who I needed to be or who I thought I needed.
So would you say that you found yourself?
Big time. Yeah. But I will say you still ride a roller coaster, right? So there's still old tendencies and old habits, right? And old thought patterns that are comfortable. And if you're not self-aware, I now catch my cycles a lot earlier because instead of months, I can catch it in about a few days. And then I reset, and then I get back to doing some of the things, whether it's journaling, reading, centering, meditating. It's easy to get back on that hamster wheel because everything is like in warp speed today and we're all busy. So till I draw those lines, those boundaries, and reestablish the word no, right? It's easy to get pulled back into that what I used to be accustomed to.
Yeah. I love how you framed everything that you just said. And one of the words that stuck for me is the word self-consuming. I think that's a very good articulation for a couple of reasons. One is from a biological reason, the body is constantly consuming itself to, create the organs or sustain the organs, whatever they may be doing. And from just the purely physical sense, our body is heading towards entropy constantly, and the body is consuming itself to prevent that from happening. Now, time and age, we know everything, lands in that arena where it's just completely consumed itself and it's done and it's finished. The second point that really resonated with me with what you said is that you're constantly keeping yourself in check. It's like the, blood pressure machine or the pulse check machine, right? You're hooked up to, and you just want to make sure. So that awareness is giving you that level of insight into yourself. And I'm very impressed to hear that you've named your naysayer. Yeah. I don't think I've done that yet, but it's definitely something that I should consider. But you remind me of the martial arts training that Renard and I have. We are constantly looking for that awareness. We know, and it becomes muscle memory to exactly your point. I'm easily falling back into those habits because it's comfortable, whether it's on the mat in a specific position or addressing somebody before sparring. It just becomes the thing. Or even golf, right? You address the ball a specific way if I'm holding a driver versus a putter versus anything in between. So what I would like to learn from you a little bit more is that, how did you, or what are some of the tools in which you just dove in and said, this will help me find myself? Because I think from a leadership lens, that practice is the thing that's missing for a lot of us. Many of us get to exactly what you're describing. I read a lot of books. I talked to so many leaders. I journal. But what does that structure look like for you? Because I think that's something that we all kind of find our way into, and it looks today differently for everybody else. So share with us, if you will, what does that structure look like for you?
Really fair question, because I think I think for the longest time I heard other people doing this, and it was like, that's not for me. I can't get there. Right. Even reading it in books sometimes. Why I loved books, because a lot of times I was like, holy cow, somebody else thinks the same way. Like, I'm not crazy. Right. But I was never courageous enough to say it out loud to see how many other people agreed with it. It took reading it in a book to be like, huh, all right, I'm not alone. And that, I think, is a comforting place too, to know, like, I think men as a whole, we had to wear this armor, this false protection, right, to show that we're not emotional creatures and beings. We're here to hunt, gather, and provide. And I think for the longest time that I believed that. You watch it on TV, right? I think from a very young age, like, you watch and remember these sitcoms, it's all about perfection. My parents loved Mayberry, and they loved some of those old time shows. And pretty soon you realize, like, hey, if you got problems, like, that's a real problem, because not everybody has problems. And my family, I love them. They're Italian, but Italians are great about talking about everybody else and shitty about talking about themselves. So nobody in my family talked about our problems. We talked about everybody else's problems. So then you're like, even more self-isolation. It's like, like, maybe something's wrong with me. So over time, I think you get this element of perfection. And when you're perfect, right? Yes, you're in judgment, but you're not in reflection. And so I think that's a key transitionary step, is that to look at yourself without judgment is hard. To judge your past based off of today's knowledge is where a lot of people are stuck. So judging a past behavior or a past action off of what you know today is unfair. And we can be stuck in that cycle of trauma. For myself, I think I hung onto those like trophies, as sick as that sounds, for motivation, right? To dust off the shoes, to say, hey man, I just got punched in the eye, in the face, in the nose 5 times, but I'm going to stand back up. And I would go back to some of the motivating, whether somebody told me I couldn't do something, or a nun telling me that I made the biggest mistake by switching to public school. I went back to use those as motivation. And what happens when you do that, it becomes not only, you don't allow it to scar, so you're constantly picking at it. And it also becomes a convenient excuse for today's behaviors, both consciously and subconsciously. So I had to go back and practice self-forgiveness in order to get to awareness first, to get to self-love, right? And true self-acceptance. And to me, that came in a variety of ways, Amir. But that was like the, I guess, mental progress. Because just like what we're talking about, I used to hate when people talked about passion and purpose. It's like, what the heck is that? I want that. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that feels like, but everybody's talking about it and I need it. So for me, it's centering, whether that's prayer. I'll be honest, like, bringing back a spiritual connection really helped me. I think without it, it's easy to be in isolation. It's easy to start to think that you need to do it on your own, and you got to do it by yourself. And you kind of get in this dangerous echo chamber, right? And if that tape doesn't have influence and you feel alone, you can start to feel despair, depression, right? You can start to feel some of those other things. And for me, I realized and had to realize that I wasn't driving the bus, that somebody else was in charge. And looking back, going through some of those experiences, I needed to forgive them, so they no longer had control over my decision making. I had to rewrite those neural pathways. So in order to reflect and be honest with myself, I think until you're really ready to look that person in the mirror and be honest, dropping the ego, dropping the rose-colored glasses, doing a lot of the work on the shadow, this person that you think you got to be, but really asking yourself tough questions. I think journaling is okay. I think it's great, but if you're not willing to ask yourself tough questions, you're constantly going to be digging around that treasure and never really uncover it. You got to dig deep. I tell people it's like good pain, like when you guys go to the mats, I'm sure, or go to the gym, you feel sore the next day. And then I honestly, I have an addictive personality, but I got addicted to self-awareness, right? Wanted to pick up books, wanted to understand even more, wanted to understand energy, wanted to understand chakras. Like it became my new obsession until a point where I realized what is enough. And that's the moment that it switched to acceptance. And acceptance is you can be your true self, right? And I went in with the question, who am I? And I came out with the question, I am. And it is. And that was probably one of the most freeing moments because it's without judgment. So journaling helps me, reading my Bible helps me, reading books helps me, staying physical helps me. When I'm doing all of those things, that's when I feel my best, Amir.
Yeah. I love that. It made me think about my own journey, and like you said, you grow up and you always taught to be tough and don't show emotion. You're not supposed to cry, etc. But then you start getting older, you be like, man, I didn't held on to stuff for 10, 20 years. I haven't told anybody. Like that's a lot to carry and for you to be able to function and do just normal day to day. So even in my part of my life, I had to figure out it was okay to be vulnerable, etc., and get that stuff out because I was like, man, the person I was previously holding all in, and I was like, man, I think I might have a heart attack carrying all this stuff. So it does change you, but I wanna go to your LinkedIn page, which I love. You have a few things on there, and you have leadership isn't a title, it's an action. And you also have loved based leadership focused. I would love to talk about those two and where you define those at.
So for me, it never mattered. I think maybe I got convinced playing soccer for so long or playing team sports for so long, where it didn't matter. Everybody could be a leader. You just led in different ways. Some was intensity, right? Some was verbal. But everybody kind of had their own way of leading. And I think when I entered the professional world, I realized very quickly that you could lead without a title. That if you displayed the characteristics, the values, the hard work, the dedication, like that was you leading in another way because somebody else sees that and they want that too, right? Or maybe they're like, well, yeah, why do we do it that way? And I think sometimes it takes courage first for leadership to expose itself or present itself the opportunity. But it takes courage. And for me, I was always one of the people that just called it how I saw it. Even as I was young and naive, I was willing to ask the question, why, right? If we know there's a better way, why do we continuously do it this way when we say we want this, right? And I think some of that is the scientific method that was drilled into my head, right, with the biology, is to work backwards. And it seemed like everybody else in business wanted to continuously work forwards and try to predict the future using yesterday's advice. And I think that comes because the profit and loss statements tended to drive a lot of business decisions, but it's a rear view mirror. It just tells you what has happened, not what will, not why it happened, right? And that kind of infuriated me because I was like, why is business not more scientific when you could make it theoretically more scientific? And coming from science, it was like, yeah, if people know there's better ways of doing things, why do they continuously? So it leaves out the element of human nature, right? And for me, human nature comes in the best form of love over fear. And how to actually motivate an individual? Yes, we've tried fear-based, right? Fear-based leadership models. Sure. Did they work in the 1920s? Absolutely. I'm sure it got some people to work. I'm sure it got some production and productivity. But then all of a sudden, we became more automated. We became more autonomous. We started using computers and systems. And over time, I think we started to lose that human element. And as we tried to make humans machines. And That's why, right? All the speculation of the AI world. It's what most businesses have been asking for the last 100 years, right? As we've already seen it. If I can tell someone when to show up, they never call in, right? They work 24/7. I can kick them, I can yell at them, I can scream at them, and they can't file a lawsuit against me. I can finally do the things that I want to do in my business, right? I don't have to pretend anymore. That's what's scary. And then you throw in the financial equation, and it's like even scarier because you can see that that's the appetite. Absolutely. But are we missing the true hidden ingredient, which is human, which is reason, which is empathy, which is values, which is some of these things that these computer models, frankly, that can never be taught? And is that the secret sauce, right, that makes organizations more innovative, more creative, higher revenues, right? That's my hypothesis is yes, right? Because when you look at the data and you look at these organizations that do these things, they tend to outperform their peers. And so I just made it my mission, right, is to not lose the human nature in leadership, to not manage to a KPI, but to manage to the individual and not think a set it and forget it approach in leadership works or a one size fits all works. I started to really focus on the individual to maximize their performance by recognizing their own potential.
So I'm curious from your lens, we take it to the other side. Why do you feel like there's a lot of leaders who don't have that approach, regardless of how successful it is? When you take the time to learn who's working with you, trying to get them improved, but there's still a lot of leaders that come from the other side, and it's more power based for the most part. Really trying to, like you say, focus on the KPIs, what's the P&L statement, etc. That's the thing I'm gonna focus on, not focus on the people. Why do you think that for a lot of leaders that still is the way they focus and not on really trying to build and improve?
Right. You practice what you preach. So a lot of these people, I think, in MBA school and things like that, right? We're not teaching human sciences. We're teaching business. So you're going to get a byproduct, just like our medical model today, right? It's prescriptions over actual health. And so if that's where you're steering people and telling them that this is what it takes in order to be successful in these roles, absolutely. You're going to watch a lot of copy paste, right? And a lot of people that said, "Hey, this is the way that I grew up in leadership. This is what it's like." And trust me, it's not easy. Within my own organization, right? You're too soft, right? We're way nicer than we used to be, and this is blue collar, which is no holds bar, right? You could say what you wanted to people. You could tell them exactly how you wanted to feel. You could swear, right? It's kind of that the nature of that industry for the most part. But for me, it could be different, right? Instead of looking at these people, what they're doing for me 8 to 5, what if I thought about what they did outside of those hours? What if I thought about how I could help prepare them better to buy their first home or to look at an auto loan a little bit differently? So bring in some of that financial literacy and awareness. And it's not just when I started seeing people, not just how they performed when they were in the walls of the office, but how they performed in society and the community and how they taught others these life skills. I started to look at the responsibility of a business a little bit differently. If we're here to invest in our people, to make them better people, not only at our business but also in the community, and that starts with just knowledge and telling them, right? It's showing them. It's not telling them what they have to do. It's showing them why it's important. And for me, I don't think our educational system does enough to prepare people, and they make them make some pretty poor decisions when it comes to credit, and they make some pretty poor decisions when it comes to finances, and that all of a sudden then spurs emotional stress that then starts to impact the work, which then looks like them talking back, showing up late, right? And I think a lot of times we just want to judge that surface level symptom. And I wanted to really find out what the actual disease was. because I think genuinely people they don't want to be a pain in the ass, right? They genuinely want to help. They want to contribute. They want to add value. So they might be disengaged because of something that's going on at home, or you haven't turned around and valued their insights and their opinion being so close to the problem for 20 years. And so I've made it upon myself to turn to the people closest to those challenges to tell me what solutions would work to speed up that entire innovation process, the experiments, because they've been experimenting already for 20 some odd years. So why should I tell them how to do their job? Why can't they tell me what they actually need? And for me, fundamentally, yes. Is it different? Do people make jokes? Absolutely. But I was willing to spend the time to fully understand why that behavior was happening. And I created a learning environment, right? We were very old. Like we needed some youth in there. But creating a learning environment, I have all patience for learning. I have zero patience for incompetence. And let me tell you what that means. If they did it once and they proved that they could do it, and then you chose that you're not doing it that way for whatever reason, that's incompetence. That is where then I have elicit a different response, because to me, that's negligence, right? That's you intentionally trying to do something that you know is not right. So for me, I have worked for those other individuals that you mentioned, Renard, and felt like I wasn't very motivated from that fear. Could they get short-term motivation out of me? Absolutely. Long-term motivation, innovation, right? Recommendations, giving and guiding them and giving them feedback? Absolutely not. And that's where I think why you see some organizations and some businesses rise above others is because of that whole philosophy as to what works.
Yeah, that is true. That last statement you said, I have worked for those type of people as well. And like you said, you can get some short term, motivation out of them. It's almost like the motivation. Well, I don't want to get fired, so I'm gonna do a little bit, but not long term. And you feel like you're part of something. So I think what's that phrase is? People don't leave jobs; they leave bad leaders or managers. That's the reason they're leaving, and that does happen a lot for the most part. And I can see, like you have said, I'm going to invest in the people. And if I invest in them, then the business is going to grow. The business will get better because I'm investing in them. And that does make a truly great leader. So
whoever, case in point, have you ever seen anybody come off a performance improvement plan?
No.
Successfully?
No. I'll add something on. The weird thing is, it's supposed to be this great thing. You're right, performance improvement plan, but I have never seen anybody come off a PIP. It's one of the worst things I've ever. Anytime I hear somebody say I'm on a PIP, I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. And then you start looking at the clock.
Yeah,
right?
You start looking at the clock. Yeah. It's a terrible name. I know they try to make it sound good. Like, no, this is a performance improvement. This is for you to improve. I mean, like that's like telling somebody you about to give them more taxes or something like that. Like, exactly. God, So no, different time. I definitely understand that, but I do want to hear from you. Of course, like us, we are podcast hosts. You are podcast hosts as well with our great friend Tyler as well. I would love to hear the story of how Time Out with Leaders has gone. Now, we heard certain things every so often, a little bit from Tyler, but I want to hear from you of the origin of Time Out.
Yeah. So it went a little like this. It was during the pandemic. So Tyler and I were two wayward individuals that were just trying to stay busy during the pandemic. And so that ended up being a lot of networking, right? And so there was this one woman who introduced us, and she met Tyler, she met me, and she was like, man, do I have somebody that you absolutely have to meet? I think is how she worded it to me. I was like, I hear that a lot. Sure. I think I got on, Tyler and I connected. It was like 7:30 in the morning, and this guy got on with a can of whoop ass, and he just had like this energy. And you see energy like that, not only, given the time of day, I was like even more piqued to my curiosity, but just somebody that was living pretty light, and felt light. He didn't feel heavy, and we weren't talking about the normal business things. He was more curious as to how it all worked. And at that point, I had helped a lot of different people. And again, back to where we started this conversation, that's where I was getting value at that time too, because I couldn't sell anything. So I ended up helping a lot of people, but the questions that he had were vastly different. And just how easy it was for him to build relationships or for him to communicate. And this is all over me meeting him probably 3 times up until that. And I just said, hey, I would love to do a podcast. I've been thinking about doing it for a couple of years now. And the idea of me doing it myself was just not what I was really interested in. I always felt, whether it's comfort or I just felt like having 2 different minds, right, dissect the same thing is always more interesting to me. You get multiple personalities or multiple perspectives, which I think is really important, so people can formulate their own opinions or perspective. So I asked him just flat out, hey, what do you think about starting a podcast? He was like, yeah. And I just immediately sent 3 messages out to 3 CEOs within our area. And I think we were like, yeah, this probably won't work. And we didn't even have a name for the podcast at that point. And all 3 of them got back to us in like 5 minutes. And I was like, whoa, that's weird. And of course, we did the thing where we already said we had it created, right? And we're starting to bring on guests and book your date. And we didn't have any of it. So you start to figure out, I think, really quickly, or you learn a lot about a person under stress. And neither one of us were stressed. And I was like, this is pretty cool, and so we formed a lifelong friendship within a month. And a lot of it was just commonality and similarities on the way we viewed. I helped him on the business side. He helped me on the personal side. And I think it was kind of that perfect thing where the universe, God, whatever we want to say, sends people exactly in your life when you need them most. And I think we both came into each other's life at a very peculiar time. And I think we both had a lot of value that we could add. And we also wanted to do it differently than other people. Like, we didn't want to overproduce it. We didn't want it to sound like these leaders were perfect. But we had a lot of questions for these leaders because we had title shyness ourselves. It's like, do these people eat the same? And like, what do they think? What makes them so different? And we quickly realized that they're not different at all. So that's really the story of how the podcast became to be. My uncle actually came up with the name Time Out with Leaders because I was reaching out to family. Tyler was reaching out to family. We're like, what would you call this? So we did ChatGPT didn't exist then. So we did the whole social science and sent it out to a lot of people and saw what we liked. And we ended up with Time Out with Leaders. And our first guest was Bill Pollock, and I think when he told us, Tyler's first question was, what was one thing your wife doesn't know about you? We knew that this was going to be a different podcast. We were going to have a lot of fun with it.
Man, I have to say, from me being a guest, I know Amir was a guest as well. It's a great podcast. It's almost, the weird thing, it's almost the same origin story for this podcast. It's very, very similar path in order for this one to be created as well. And we talked about Tyler off the air. Yeah, ball of energy. It's I will say, like, I would love to see more people have that type of energy, because I always tell the story of when I met Tyler and he was a ball of energy and I thought it was weird. I was like, man, why is he so happy? I said, that's weird to me. Like, shouldn't be this happy. And then, but then you're around him, you'd be like, man, I need somebody like that around me on a regular basis, man. And he just,
selfless, I think, is the
selfless, And
when you can remove self and you can ask questions of others and you really try to get at the heart. And it's funny because that was me. And like, you find somebody else, you do see how rare it is, because it took me that long to find somebody that I was like, holy shit, somebody else that views the world a little bit like, what if I was in their shoes? What would I do? And would I show up differently? And that's why, and that's what we wanted to give back through our podcast is, yes, have these people on, but don't give me these pre-canned answers that you've been training yourself or have trained yourself to come up with. I want to know the person that's actually inside, not just what you say you do during your day.
I agree with that. Now I'm gonna have to ask because I think we did ask Tyler when he was on here who has been. Now you don't have to say names, and I don't want you to put anybody's name out there. But have you had one of those guests where it's just like, man, this is not going to be the best episode? Yeah.
Yeah, it was like one of our early episodes, but yeah, I would drop name drops. I don't really care, but I won't to spare this. But yeah, not at all, right? I think when you start getting on that I train really quickly, right? You start saying all these ideas are my ideas. I think Tyler and I, like, this was when we were still recording in the same room as one another, just like looking at each other, like, oh God. I think we asked a total of like maybe 4 questions for an hour. Yeah, it's just one of those things that you remember, but then you become aware of it. And I think that's the other cool thing about self-awareness is you can start to notice things in yourself, and the whole spot it, you got it methodology, right? Is you can start to see it in others. And I it's not that I think you become curious as to why that they're, but you start to understand it a little bit more and can see it for what it is rather than who they're pretending to be.
Yeah. You know, Kevin, I feel like there's a mirror in front of me right now. You know, I was talking to Renard about something that happened to me personally, and I said, you know, I recognize, and I've been telling myself more and more, you can't read the label from inside the box. And it's a cliche now, but everybody, when you start reflecting on that phrase, you start realizing. And to your point about, you know, you and Tyler and how you start recognizing that not many people have that type of energy. I look at Renard in the same way, and I'm like, you know, Renard has certain qualities and gifts, and I tend to be more heady and intellectual and into books. And I've been accused of sounding like a professor more than anything else from a very young age. And that was intimidating to folks. So I've had people tell me you're very intimidating, and that surprised me. But you know, on the podcast, you know, you mentioned the I train. You know, it's almost its cousin of the L train, which you can take L and replace it with any other word. I won't say it out loud, right? But you know, on the point of having guests, you know, there's a methodology that Renard and I have sort of started to land into. And when you start the podcast, you don't really have any of that. You just kind of say, hey, I want to do this. I've got this idea. I'm inspired by it. Let me go take action, right? And so you have the intention, you go to action, and it becomes a character trait after a while. Just walk us through, like, have you landed on a specific kind of, hey, these are the themes I want to hit? Because I'm sure there are other listeners out there who thought about doing a podcast, and I'll warn everybody thinking about it. Yeah. It's a lot of work. So it's great to have a partner who is different from you. You know, the idea that great minds think alike, I actually don't no longer subscribe to that. I think you have to be different. What's important is that energy, to your point as well. Like, you have to have that human connection. Renard and I were introduced by a lady who said that, hey, you got to talk to this guy because he's, you know, you'll resonate. And sure enough, like, our first conversation, I was like, hey, buddy, how do you feel about doing a podcast? I've been thinking about it for 2 years.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then, like, you know, when you feel it. And I think for Tyler, right, is sometimes we start to see people that are making us better, right? And, you know, they're not making you worse. And it really caused me to look and say, well, who am I surrounding myself with? And I think sometimes when we're in that negative mindset, right, or we have that victim mindset, I have this new theory that we're racing towards an entitlement now, right, as a society. It's like this, which kind of speaks to why we see 18-year-olds that think they should be my manager. You know, it's like this race to entitlement. And I think if you're a victim and you're taking on that mindset, you tend to look at society and you see the evidence that supports that. So if you don't think a lot of yourself, you're going to hear all these things of what you're bad at, what aren't you good at, rather than taking a more positive, right, and optimistic and you start to collect different evidence. It was always there, but it was how you chose to show up and how you chose to see it. And that, I think, was the most beneficial for me, was that realizing that I actually had a choice in that. My happiness was a choice. It wasn't an outcome. And I think that is fundamentally different than what we're accustomed to. If I have this, or one day when I do this, I will be happy. And I subscribed to that mad science for a long time. But then when I started to acquire those things and that wasn't the outcome, started asking a lot more questions.
Yeah. Renard, on the talk of asking questions, I know you and I always try and prepare as much as we can for guests. So Kevin, I'm going to ask you, man, because in our quest to be better, right? We're writing things down now, Renard and I. We're trying to be better about our questions and our thought process. Do you guys ever write anything down? Because the name like Time Out with Leaders, I'm thinking like this is going to be a fun show.
Yeah.
I get to be a guest on this thing.
Yeah, no, we did. Like you said early on. Yeah, absolutely. And then we felt like it was almost robotic. And I think you're waiting for that question to end, or the answer to that question to end, and to ask your next one. And I think at this point, we try to really feel in the conversation, to put ourselves just directly in that conversation like no one else is listening. And you'll hear Tyler and I, we are asking pretty selfish questions because it's coming from a place that I have the same question. But tell me how you got through this. Like, this is what I'm going through and this is what I'm experiencing. And I've always viewed, I don't care who you are. You could be the person that's panhandling at the end of one of our highways. And that person has something of value that they've experienced that they can share as the form of wisdom. And it's seeing that each person's story has something of value, of equal value to my story. And I think that, to me, is why I choose to do the show, why it's a passion project. It's sure, do I get to meet cool people? Yeah, absolutely. Do I get to have fun conversations? Certainly. But it's to know that you're not alone, and to know that other people that have made it, right, are having a lot of the same thoughts that you are. And they have just found ways to either deal with it or not deal with it, and I think the idea that you have to be perfect in order to achieve that definition of success, should it be your definition of success, you don't have to be somebody different. And you don't have to pretend, and you don't have to wear a mask. You can actually truly show up as your authentic self, which is encouraging to others. And its most simplistic form is leadership. Getting people to become the person that they've always been, but never wanted to recognize or didn't want to see, is, to me, what my leadership role is all about. And because when I had somebody that believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself or see it for myself, that's when I was willing to step outside my comfort zone. That's when I was willing to grow, to do something, to dare to be different, and then over time you get your own wings. And then I think you look upon yourself that your story is your testimony, and you have to share that testimony to others to know that, hey, I'm not there, but I'm here, and gives them the opportunity to have hope. And I think without hope, I think our world gets really dark really quick. So I always try to light other people's candles, and I think that's what Tyler does. And I think that's what people like. I think the energy draining, when you allow some of that negative energy, it does attach to you. So if that's all you're hearing all day and that's all you're surrounding yourself with, pretty soon it's not pretty out there. So I always say, just if you look around and you're surrounded by 6 idiots, don't think that you're going to make the 7th genius,
Yeah. So, Kevin, you've obviously gone through your own personal transformation journey. You've started out as the operating expert. I have this skill. I have a bunch of knowledge. Let me tell you how to put all of this system in place so you can get the work done. And then you go from that person who has the answers to the person who's trying to elevate the other people through their own personal leadership, but by starting with themselves first, right? So there's that huge leap that you had to take yourself. And I believe every leader goes through that journey. So for somebody who is, still in that transition, haven't quite made that leap into where they know themselves, for yourself in your own journey, as you think back, and you started showing up as this version of yourself today, and it gets better and better with every iteration, what actually got harder for you as opposed to getting easier? Because we talk about the easy part, but what about the hard part? Like, what got harder?
Pretending to care about things that I really didn't. Right. That was hard. Or to have a new opportunity and not be as excited as I was in the past. And I was uncomfortable with peace. And that was like weird to me, because I didn't have those stories of old to motivate myself in the same way. And I think it was that I'll never forget it. Cause I mean, we're talking very recent, with one of those examples, and it took me a while to see it. I thought something was wrong, right? I was like, man, something's not right. Like, this used to be easy to me. Like, why am I struggling right now to motivate myself? This used to be one of the things I could always go back to that tank, right, and pull that out. So I got uncomfortable with peace, and then I was like, maybe I should go back to some of those things I was doing before. If I'm lacking creativity or I'm lacking something, like maybe I need to go back to some of those old habits to maybe that's why I had this. And I think it all starts with asking questions, whether it's of yourself or you're asking it of others. And questions to me have, one, made me a lot of money in sales, yes, but it has also helped me to learn a lot more than rather thinking that I know everything. And to me, I think there's a big disconnect between knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And I think we got a society that thinks that I can find something online that makes it knowledge. And I have a varying opinion on that, because sometimes it might be academia, like you said, Amir, where it comes from this utopian state that frankly does not exist within the normalcy of society today. And so I think, for me, it was, how do I take some of those trials and those tribulations and give them back to others in a way that helps them through their own challenge. And I thoroughly enjoy that, but it is a journey, right? And I'm not done. There is no pinnacle. There is no peak there. You are in this continuous process, because call it the yin and yang, call it heaven and hell, call it whatever we want to throw on it, from whatever religion that you want to say that you believe in. There's a reason why there is one and the other, right? If everything was good, it would be boring, right? And it wouldn't be good, because you wouldn't have a definition to define it by anything else or label it by anything else. So for me, it's presence. It's the power of now, which I love, by Eckhart Tolle. And that book really spoke to me. It's how do I get out of this trap, this prison that I've created, whether it's my own thinking or it's other people telling me, how do I break free of that? Because I was essentially trapped in my past, while also afraid, right, and trying to predict and control my future. And so I was never in the now, and I probably missed a lot of opportunities because I wasn't looking for them.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a very heady question, and I would just want to see what your reaction to this question is going to be. Okay. So this is quite impromptu, Kevin, but I think you'll do well. So one of the things that I've always believed in for a long time, and I've, over the years kind of been validated by it, which is the way we think, in which language we speak, in the language we speak, dictates on how we show up. And that's what we call culture in some places, the culture of, let's say, Japan or China versus the culture of the United States, and so on and so forth. And as I think about more and more how AI is the common source for most of us now, or it's becoming the common source of knowledge or information or whatever label you want to put on it, it's generally speaking the same language, which means that either you are going to be a native speaker of that language, or you will be influenced by somebody else's way of thinking, thus changing your own way of thinking or your own cultural identity. Do you have a perspective on that, on how this maybe, monoculturalization is a word that I can use here, is going to affect the work that you do, which is very physical in nature, versus those of us who are more, I'm at a desk and I'm working through computers and my interaction is primarily with computers. Do you have a point of view?
It's an interesting thought, and it's funny because I was just reading an article the other day of how much content is now produced by AI, right? Establishing that common language, and I hadn't thought about it from your social conditioning perspective, right? It's like what does that do to a person over time? I mean, we can look at the most recent innovation, right? It was online, the .com area, and then we got into social. Maybe that could gleam somewhat of a use case or a previous test case as to what that could start to look like. I have noticed it with myself. I try to use it as a tool to augment my work, right? I don't look to it to give me ideas, really. There was a time when it first came out, and I was, and you definitely stop using that part of your brain. And I read, I think, an article from Harvard Business Review, and they said that part of the brain was shrinking. And I even go back to today's kids. I grew up with a GPS. I mean, I still remember maps. I still remember taking like landmarks, right, to know how to get around. What happens when we stop using these parts of our brain? I think you'll see benefits in other areas. Heck, if Elon Musk is right, maybe money isn't an object by 2035 or whatever estimate that he gave. Like, what does that do to a global population that has been so driven by money since the beginning of time? What does that do? I don't know what that does. Will people know what to do without needing to work? Will they be able to find value in what they do without work and in this exchange of time and money and expertise? I don't know what that will look like. But can tell you, if we look at society, my dad is still figuring out who he is because he was his job until he was 67 and decided to retire. So again, I think you see some of the social sciences that are already played out, and you could say, well, man, that might be chaotic. Are we ready for that? And I think we got a lot to learn. I just hope that it doesn't pull us further apart than it does together. And I hope, right, if we have more time on our hands, that you see more innovation on the social sciences side, that you see more innovation on how to attack homelessness and food scarcity and some of these other things. So if we're going to take those brilliant minds that are working for businesses to make them a lot of money, and maybe we turn that focus and that energy into something good, it could be a benefit to society. But love the question. You got me definitely thinking because I think it's something that we don't want to be surprised by once we get there.
I can agree with that last sentiment you just shared. We don't want to be surprised when we get there because it's not going to be a good surprise.
Yeah.
Renard, I'm going to bounce the same question off of you, my friend. What is your perspective or reaction?
Man, I think Kevin had a good point. Especially when it comes to AI and how I remember stuff used to be, like you say, maps and all that. I remember driving around with MapQuest papers all in the car trying to figure out how to get someplace, and it was still the wrong place. So I understand technology changes. If the way we grew up, we saw a point where there really wasn't a lot of technology, and then technology just developed over time. We're pretty much the last generation that ever seen that. Most kids will grow up in technology that we haven't even seen yet. But it does come to mind what happens to the human part of us in learning and wanting to learn and not saying, well, AI take care of it and not use that part of the brain. That does worry me. Like even for me, I use AI, but I use it not to do all the work, but just to be a helper in some things. Yes, I can collect a lot of information I need for one thing a lot faster than it would previously. But I still want to continue to learn, and that's what worries me, that the future generations will stop wanting to learn how to just learn things and be creative. Or does the other side happen is that we let AI take some stuff and then we start become more creative of things that we wanted to do, but we couldn't because we had to do said job. You know, there's you always ask somebody, hey, what are other things that you want to do? And they always tell you it's something that has nothing to do with what they currently do as a job. Some people want to paint, some people want to build, etc. I think for us as a society and humans, we all will have to continue to be builders. If we do that, then I think we'll be all right no matter what technology comes out.
You know what I just thought about while you were talking? Could it kill curiosity?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And if curiosity is killed, right, then I think it gets to the crux of all of that. Because for me, this new generation that has only grown up with technology, I have found management, you have to spell out every step that they'll follow it. They definitely will. They're rule followers, right? But if that step is missing and they have you need to figure it out step, it is a lot harder, right, than previous old generations that you could say the same thing, that gap still exists, and they would leapfrog over that gap and keep on going. Some of their reasoning and their problem solving, to your point, is if it's not said and it's not in front of them, they really struggle to use that creativity within their own mind to innovate on hand. So that great question, Amir. I'll be thinking about it the rest of my Sunday afternoon. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to sound cheesy here, I'll just say this, there will be more cats.
Yeah.
Because, curiosity killed the cat. With lack of curiosity, there will be more cats.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Herding cats will become just as hard as it is now, if not harder.
Yeah. So how does that affect your recruiting then, Kevin? I mean, I'm thinking about, in the construction business, when these young men and women are hearing that the future of work is a laptop in a remote location of your choosing, how do you bring people to the table to even entertain your industry?
I'll be honest, it's easier than what you just made it sound. Because you hear the adverse side, and they have friends that went to school for graphic design, and now those people come out. So I think for skilled trades, do I think it will eventually be autonomous? Sure. Do I feel like that's 20, 30 years down the road? Probably, right? There's something to be said with human touch, right? Whether it's tightening something, whether it's understanding how something's going to work. There's a lot of reasoning, and actually like engineering and physics. So I tell my guys all the time, like, you guys are like physicists. And they're like, what the heck are you talking? I failed physics. And it's like, no, well, you actually are doing it every day. Rigging is like something that you're doing it every single day. And I think, so the conversation, to answer your question, Amir, has been a lot easier. It's finding people who like to work with their hands, that aren't buying into the same idea that I have to sit behind a desk and do something that I'm not really passionate about to make more money. And I think it's rewriting the stigma that's been around skilled trades for a while. And we all know those people that we went to college and college really wasn't for them, and we forced them into something. And a lot of those same people are heavy drinkers and addicts now because they're doing something that they never wanted to do and they were forced to. So I think we've put on more of our educational hats and showed them the data, the information. You can make 6 figures in 5 years here, right? While your other friends are racking up 6 figures worth of debt. If this is for you, like, you do have a career in this. It's not just a job. And I think for a long time, blue collar work was looked at as jobs and not careers. But there is a lot of upward mobility. There is a lot of opportunities within our organization and just the industry as a whole, which gets people excited. And I think it gets them away from the belief that AI can replace them.
I love that answer.
I'll add something to that because, for me, I grew up, not everybody went to college. The people I saw, people work for the post office, the electrician, the plumbers. Mm-hmm. Those are still great long career jobs. So I don't want any of the listeners thinking like you have to sit behind a desk. Like these are great jobs that still today, like when the AC goes out, you call you don't call, Claude
I
to
think
come fix
plumbers
it.
are the fastest
Yes.
millionaires in the
Yes.
United States.
It's something people forget. Like some of these jobs have outlasted every evolution of technology that's gone around. You still call a plumber when something goes on. You still
Every
call an
economic
electrician.
downturn, it's
Yeah,
relatively resilient against
still.
the economy. Yes.
Yeah, construction, etc. All these things still require a lot of heavy human touch. Now, is technology starting to add something to it? Eventually, we're going to get into robotics, etc. They'll take some of that, but I still think it's going to be a human who, when you ask for somebody to come fix something, it's going to happen. Construction, etc. So I still think that that's still going to be around as blue collar jobs. People need to remember blue collar jobs is what built the world we have today. It wasn't, sitting behind a computer. It helps, but the blue collar jobs is what built America and built most countries.
And that's to your point. You've used the word forgot. I think we forget, right? Because by the time general society is walking into a building, it's done, right? They didn't see what it looked like before. They saw what it looked like after. And I was guilty of that. Like now that I'm in this industry, I tell my guys all the time, you're moving America. Like your expertise doesn't land that innovation and that job creation without you. And I think sometimes in skilled trades, you can get away from that really quick because you're just focused on what you're doing right in front of you. And so I use that as a constant reminder to my field guys that what they do, yes, is challenging. Sure, is it grueling? Absolutely. But things wouldn't happen unless you were willing to do this. So to your point, I think it's rewriting the old standards of our guidance counselors. Guidance counselors told us, right, you got to go to college. You want to be down here or you want to be up here? And we all listened to them. We're like, I don't want to be that fool down there. So I'm going to go towards this. So at the end of the day, I think it's just rewriting the narrative with true information, not influenced by one's opinion.
Yeah. I'll nerd out here a little bit because you said that human beings are forgetful, and I believe that. There's a word. So if you know the Arabic language has triliteral root words. So there's 3 letters and it has multiple meanings, and then you conjugate and you get a different meaning and so on. The word for human in Arabic is insan, and the triliteral root word for that, one of its meaning is forgetful. So if coming back to my commentary about monoculture, that information is lost on anybody who never studied the language and what it offers, because English language doesn't offer that. We've got plenty of paradoxes in the English language. So anyhow, I love the point you made, and I can't imagine a 1,000-pound robot climbing into my attic trying to fix my AC, because that's what it would take.
Yeah.
100%. I'm sure it will. I'm sure you'll see it.
But it won't be 1,000 pounds
or something like that.
Yeah, it might be something small, etc. Like I say, it'll definitely help.
Yes,
it'll be a helper to a lot of these jobs, but we still need that human. Everybody says human in loop. I do believe we still need that at the end of the day.
Definitely, absolutely.
Well, Kevin, we are way past the top of the hour, and I am just.
I had to look at what time it is. I'm like, what time is it? Wow.
Yeah. No, it's been a great conversation, and I'm just, my mind is buzzing right now with all the good stuff that you've shared with us. But one of the things we like to do towards the end of the show, Kevin, is we call it the lightning round.
Okay.
And it's just whatever the first thing comes to your mind, just share that reaction with us. I like to lean on my good friend Renard and ask him to get us started. I know he's got a bunch of questions, and I'm sure he's going to challenge you in some way.
No, I'm game.
All right. So first one, what is the most useless piece of leadership advice that is still in circulation?
Yeah, God. Man, there's a lot. Most useless. Individual strength, like perfection, is the only way to effectively lead.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, me too. So, is there a question you ask yourself before you decide you're going to trust someone?
No. Yeah. Should I? Yes, I'm sure I should. Yeah, I should have learned my lesson at this point. But I'm one of the trust first and learn later kind of people.
Right. I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. HR or operations, which department moves the company faster?
Yeah, operations, I think.
Why?
So it's a double. I think they're all required. My wife and I just had a fascinating conversation about strategy, and she was like, "Well, what department's responsible for strategy?" And I was like, "Well, all of them, right? All of them work together. Best strategy." If we start to think like, "Oh, this is this department's responsibility," I think then the strategy is like half baked or half cooked, and we tend to miss things. Operations for me, I believe it starts with people, process, technology, and partnerships. I believe there's more similarities between HR and operations, but yet they seem like worlds apart in most organizations. So I think in really good organizations, HR and operations are working very closely together from a planning perspective, from a development perspective. To me, operations and HR should be one and the same. To answer your question in a roundabout way, I think they have equal importance, and they shouldn't be separated.
So, Kevin, I'm going to say you and your wife are actually both right from my point of view.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take that offline with her after this call. Yeah.
But I'll tell you why I believe that, because you can have strategy that's informed by operations, or you can have strategy that's informed by vision, so there's not a right or wrong thing. You could come from it from either direction. So there's,
absolutely.
To your point,
I like the ideating, but I also like the execution and delivery, and those things can be totally different. Like what's actually what can you support, and what can that look like? But it also enables that growth to execute that strategy. And I think when operations is not informed of the direction of where that company is going, then somehow that strategy that we all thought was great doesn't actually work.
Well, the old saying goes, strategy without execution is hallucination.
Yeah. You got a lot of hallucinators out there. Those business plans that we all put together in January and then they're going to the drawer by February 1st. Yeah, I think we continue to see that that lack of science from a business planning perspective.
Yeah. All right, I got a question for you. So something a fifth generation company does by instinct that a corporate executive would have to design on purpose.
Cool. A policy. Yeah. Like it or not, yeah. Policy probably is the easiest one.
Okay. I'll give you my last one. What is the last thing that genuinely surprised you about your own leadership?
I think how easy it is to get influenced, knowing right KPIs and knowing all that. I think how easy it is to be distracted by that. As much as you say you want to focus on the inputs, the output is what speaks for the success. And I think sometimes even myself, I would look at the result and say that that's good enough, right? And rather than what could get better or how could we improve, but that's again that happens short term, and it's always like, oh yeah, but we could probably make that a little bit better. But knowing when is enough, right? And knowing when you are in that flow state, and that's why I think the change management styles of old don't really work that well, and you have to include those people because I like pushing out an idea or a process that we collaborated on, and then you reiterate. I mean, some of these things are on version like 60 at this point, right? You got to roll something out, you got to try something just to start that momentum. So sometimes it's easy to say, well, why do I want to bring in uncertainty when these results are great? And then I can understand that, but so it's easy, I think, to fall in that trap. To me, it was the biggest surprise.
All right, I'll ask my last question, Kevin. What is the best leadership wisdom that you've ever received?
Be you. Just be yourself. And I think that was, all these books tell you who you have to be or how you have to do it. And I think it's a gross understatement of your uniqueness and your gifts, which make you you. So that's probably the best wisdom that I ever got before I went into leadership.
That is great advice. With that,
Well,
Kevin.
no. Hold on. I got to ask one question because I just thought about something. Since where he is, he's in New York.
Yes.
He's in Rochester.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm gonna have to ask.
Happens to be sunny today. But
I'm gonna have to ask you about pizza. It's got to be a question.
Oh yeah,
I have a feeling what he's gonna say, but
yeah,
New York style pizza or Chicago style.
See, and you hit the nail on the head because Rochester has an identity crisis because we're kind of in between both cities. So you get the influence of both. I'm a New York City style, Brooklyn style pizza, flat. I like the thinner the better. Not an overly crust guy. So yeah, New York City. I like to fold it too, so it makes it easier to fold.
Okay. So I'm assuming when you take trips, if it is in New York, you're not touching that pizza.
Yeah, I was asking around and when I was down in Dallas, I was asking around what was the pizza scene. Tyler didn't give it any great review.
There's no pizza scene out here. There's barbecue scene, yes, but there's no pizza scene.
Yes, yeah. I saw some chicken wing spots though. It seems like
yeah.
Well, so I gotta ask you, Kevin, do you consider a focaccia a pizza?
No. That's yeah. Yeah, no, that's like bread with toppings. Yeah.
Isn't that what a pizza is?
Yeah, dough. I like the thin. Yeah, bread. Yeah, you can mix them together, but just not if you want to call it pizza, in my opinion.
There you go. I like it.
All right. Well, there's no way I can offend your sensibilities with your answer. The good answer.
Hey, to each their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was fun, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Kevin, before we part ways, if somebody wants to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to find you and reach you?
Renard, or you brought it up earlier, LinkedIn. I usually try to share a little bit when I can. I'm trying to get better at it. I used to be great at it, but going through the experience, I think I try to share it with others. And again, if I learn something, I want to share it with others. And if one person reads it and learns something from it, that's my whole goal. So LinkedIn is probably the best. And yeah, if you guys want to listen to Tyler and I, just like Renard and Amir did a fantastic job on here, we like to have fun conversations just like this too.
Excellent. That is great information. Thank you. And to our listeners, what I'd like to ask you is to please take a moment, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, because that is how other leaders will be able to find us. And that 30 seconds of your time is going to help Renard and I keep doing the work that we are doing, because our goal is to help other leaders get better. And hopefully these conversations are giving you value. And hopefully, if it resonated with you, then you will take a moment to share this with other leaders who might need to hear this conversation. And to our guest, Kevin, I cannot be more grateful to you. Thank you for taking a moment and giving us some of your time and sharing some of your wisdoms and insights. But before I part ways, Renard, any last words?
And go listen to Time Out with Leaders. It's a great podcast. Go subscribe. It is awesome. Kevin and Tyler, one of the best podcasts I've ever been on as a guest and listened to. Go subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast as well.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you as well. And with that, we will see you on the next episode.